Hello, and welcome to another edition of Becoming a Gibborim. This is going to be part 3. Today, you can expect the unexpected because we're diving right down into those ridiculously amazing places in life where people suddenly are pressed to their limits. Their actual limits, not just the theoretical ones that you sit in class all day and stare at boards and people write numbers and letters all about you defining your limits and giving you garbage tests that just make you miserable and sad and depressed because everybody in the room is suddenly rated on a scale that you can see publicly. I'm not talking about those kinds of limits. I'm talking about the actual human experience potential of limits. Limits that are so mind-bogglingly extreme. They change people forever. They alter the course of your life so intentionally, or the lives of the people around you, that they become remembered. They become known. They become mighty. They become valiant. They become bold and courageous, and or they're sifted. They're strained out. It passes over them, and that opportunity in that moment in their life they don't seize upon. They are tested to their limits and they break. And in their breaking, they fail to achieve a moment that their life was destined for, a moment that the power and the courage and the hope and the joy and overcoming and long suffering and enduring all these powerful experiences in our life, what they could have produced in us are squandered. They're wasted. They're cast off of us. They're sold for another scene of a movie that we're too bored to even deal with. So we just zone out and watch stuff like that instead of go live a valiant, expedient life. Instead of living dangerously, we are satisfied by vicariously being entertained by those who portray wild and exciting lives, by a captured imagination. That we've been enslaved into mindsets that were programmed into us, every one of us, from the day we were born, with or without your agreement, willful agreement, maybe without your real understanding, but you've had veils placed over your eyes since you came out of the womb and were born into this world and this experience. There is a God of this age. There is many gods of this age that you were born into, and they seek to capture the imagination, right? Is this not Disney's motto? To capture the imagination, to be the architects and the engineers of that which people imagine? Because I'm pretty certain that people have begun to imagine vain things in prevalence, in an abundance like never before. And because of that, the minds of men, the minds of women, the minds of children have been corrupted, have been turned into another thing. They've been poisoned slowly by something that was delicious, cheap, and convenient. And it's cost us all of the mighty, valiant things that we were made to do. That was the trade, the exchange that we get to be entertained versus the unction and the power and the long-suffering brutality of living vibrantly. We are going to study all throughout Scripture as I go along later and in this series, different individuals who've lived valiantly. I'm also going to be studying humans that you can maybe a little more relate to because they're more in our modern times. There's people who live valiantly, I would contend, as anybody who's ever lived on the face of the earth. They're living today. They've been building up a history of playbooks, their testimonies that they hand off to the next generation. Like they actually put them in books, generally not in well-produced Hollywood wanding out, broadcasting their spells into a media that is controlled by the same beast system of the gods of the world. You generally don't get to learn the actual testimonies of any sincere, authentic, radically devoted Gibborim. You tend to just learn about the fallen Gibborim. You tend to just learn about the ones who gave in during that moment and gave themselves over to a different spiritual power that is available, that is calling to us every single day, that is always readily findable. Now, I really am confident, though, if you need anything, you can seek with all of your heart. You can knock and the door will be opened. And if you can ask a question and it will be answered. I really believe you can pray and ask the Redeemer and he can transform you and give you power, just like we read about in the scriptures, that you can be a mighty one. You can be the most impactful person in your community through your prayers, through your intercession, through you actually walking the nasty parts of town and going and talking to the guys who are depressed and miserable and they wear really nice suits every day and they're all eating bullets because of the way the world has turned on them and devoured their retirement plans, the things they've trusted in, the promises of mammon. There's women who are just shattered in their identity. They've been corrupted and consumed by a system that ate their identity and sold them a shattered, self-centered, egocentric, miserable version of what a woman of powerful living looks like. It's not the corporate goddess that they're selling everybody. It's not Athena either, the goddess of war and violence, and I can be just as powerful as any man. Not the kind of power. I've never seen a stronger person in my life than when I watched my wife go through natural childbirth. 3 days, 3 nights of labor. I didn't feel anything she felt. And I've never been more awed by the power under control, meekness. My wife had this strength flowing through her, this determination, this absolute dedication and drive. She was so mighty in that moment. Women are some of the most powerful prayer warriors I've ever known in my life. They have spiritual radar that I think is exponentially more sensitive than man's, almost always. And if not, it's generally because it's been hindered or it's been mitigated and beaten out of them. They get gut instinct feelings. They get lady radar. I don't even know how to put it better. They have a knowing that is so, that can be tuned and focused and zeroed in on to danger, to something that's not right here. It's something smells a little bit like bull poop, like for real about this situation. They have such giftings and abilities and power and determination that can come upon them when they are loved and cared for and provided the environment to thrive, the nutrients to grow abundantly. Man, they can actually bear fruit. Women get to actually bear fruit, genuine fruit, powerful fruit, fruit that lives on past my dead bones decaying fruit. Because you can be the mightiest man in the room, but if you die, your lineage dies with you unless you have found a fruit bearer who will bear up your armor and co-labor with you into the fog of war. Or if the Father would be so merciful, to equip you with arrows to reload your bow with. I actually mean that. The fruit that women bear, the wonderful fruit that they bear, are arrows that are in the hand of the living God and in yours as their father. If you're so blessed to be so, or if you adopt them to be your own, man, they become some of your most deadly, precise, powerful tools that you will ever have to fire off against the enemy or against those spiritual battles that we contend against or against the physical ones that we contend against. You have to work by the sweat of your brow as part of the way you wage war against it for men. But women, they get sanctified in this unbelievable, indescribable, supernaturally empowering way when they go from being just the gal who's lived her life in a set of conditions that the world promised her if she followed it, she would be content. Or she suddenly seizes upon the power of the living God and gets to transform, becomes a different woman. I've watched my wife become a new woman since I've gotten to know her. She thrives in the wild way we live our life. She has blossomed. I watched her be depressed and miserable and hating her every day when she was plugged into that corporate system that took her choice from her. They offer free choice as a marketing scheme, but you become just another task. You become another slave. You're a taskmaster who's assigned over you. You'll always have it in that system. But there's such a hedge of protection that I can be over her and the Father can be over us, and it flows the peace of God down into our home, and it allows us to live how He's called us to be. For us, that's like gypsies in the wind. I've never thought how happy my wife could be than when we live randomly roaming around. She loves it. She's fascinated by it. She's excited to see new things. She loves creation. She loves being creative, expressing herself, empowering the people around her to be able to express themselves. She loves people sincerely. She loves His creation. I got to see all these expressions in my wife because, honestly, we did get pregnant and we had a child. It changed her. It changed me. It changed us so radically that we had to change the way we lived our lives from then on out. We had to realize that we'd been entrusted with something that was so powerful. The world has tried to make us believe that we should kill it off because it's inconvenient. Like the one most powerful fruit you could ever have in your life is going to be the one that carries your name, that carries the name of the God that you love. Because we're also going to spend some time in here reading about children who are mighty. We just read last week about David. Don't forget he's a child, in a sense. He may be a very young teen, but by most standards, he's not been made a man. And yet he is the one teaching men about how to be mighty. And we have a lot of examples of that throughout the scripture, where young men, young women, old women, barren, withered women, exhausted, weary, depressed, miserable murderers of men become mighty, become Gibborims. This entire scripture is full of mighty people, and it doesn't look the way the world wants to sell us. The world has their con they're always offering, but it's a poison. If you drink too much of it, it will always make you sick. If you drink any of it, it will eventually poison you. I love getting to see the transformation I got to see in my wife. And she became a mighty woman in those process, in the yielding to it. We seek to do that. We seek to continue to labor towards that. There's so many of you that need to hear that today, sincerely, for whatever it is. Listen and understand your children need you. If other children are around you and they don't have that, be that for them if the Father would so bless you to do so. Bless them. There's a lot of children out there who need a good quality, godly, mighty woman in their life, now more than ever. Because there's a lot of people who woke up today being bitter and angry at their children because they've never spent more than, I don't know, a couple hours at most a day with their own family. Most people never actually live a life together. They've abandoned that completely. They've avoided it. They've built walls in their houses to compartmentalize their children away from them. Actually think about the layout of a house versus, say you all lived in a really nice big tent. You could have some draperies and stuff, but it's not the same. We live in a tiny space. We've been going through what you all are dealing with for about 18 months because you can't escape it. You live in a tiny house. There is no like, hey, yeah, I definitely want some space right now. I have tiny sliding doors. They're not like real doors. I love real doors. Doors that close like the garage door made of solid oak that's been treated to withstand the fires of a car fire for 8 minutes longer than most of the dusty frame all around it. But I like solid, robust doors. Sorry, I'm trying to get things out of my pockets. And tiny zipper pockets. Some pants put zippers on their pockets. They're worthless. Don't do it. They always break because I'm sandy. Anyways, chapstick. One of the other things you should carry on your person always. Even if you live in one of those outrageously wet environments all the time. It's functionally wonderful. Because sometimes there's things called sunlight. And the sun can scorch your face. It's true, but it's good for it. And you need it. And your face should be scorched and full of lines. Stop thinking you don't need wrinkles. That's the dumbest, most exceptionally, horrifically destructive lie also. Women, you fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. Your face is stunning and ageless if you don't hide it under a mask every day. I mean it. Let your light shine forth because it's brilliant and it's beautiful. And then we can see all these micro expressions on your wonderful faces and feel the compassion and the love and just the sincerity of care. And then you can cry freely. I digress. I think it's really powerful when people actually just live as they are, just authentically human, authentically created. It's a powerful thing. I get distracted. I'm known to do that. But I hear a lot of people talk about things like, I have wrinkles on my face. And I'm like, yes, most assuredly. Praise God, you earned some wrinkles in your life. Our skin, my baby skin is so soft and like unwrinkled. They're sometimes born like wet raisins. Babies don't really look unwrinkly, and people are like, they're so beautiful. It's the most beautiful thing I've seen in my entire life. No. I'm not quite that same level of like awesomely like wowed by brand new babies sometimes, are not like the most stunning thing, as people would say. Their life in an unbelievable, totally unique way. To me, it's just awestrucking that human came out of another human. Freaking crazy. It is ridiculous. It is a total actual miracle, sincerely, for life to come out of another body. It's amazing. That's why I do a lot of gardening now. I make knives for gardening. I tried to. This originally was going to be a knife for gardening, but then it turned into this moderately amazing, wonderful thing. It's not done, but I digress. People need to wear their authentic skin suit every single day. It's wonderful. It will free you, and you will feel vibrantly. Your skin is an organ. Just think about it. Don't put nanoparticulate anti-sunscreen poisons all over your face because you think that the sun's wrinkles are bad. They're a gift. Anyways, so is gray hair, by the way. You earned every single piece of it. And if the Father can count every hair on your head, don't you think you plucking your gray hair out is like the wrong thing to do? The hoary head. We should respect the hoary head. That's such a brutally, almost offensive translation of it. And I've tried to compliment people who have hoary heads. Hoary head means gray or silver fox-like, however you want to put it. I prefer silver fox. I think that's wonderful. Or like, I think about manta. I felt manatee bristles on my leg once, and sometimes gray hair feels like that, if I was honest. It doesn't feel the same as other hair, so I can understand the urge to pluck it. But anyways, back out of manatee hair, because I got a little sidetracked. Let your face be you. Let your hair be you. Let your life be exactly what it was made to be. And you will suddenly see that there's so many gifts waiting for you that then the power of the living God can flow freely into you and through you and out of you, in spite of us, with us, because of how we are, because of who we are. It's incredible. Anyways, I know last week I left you guys on a little spear talk. We had a fair amount of Nephilim talk, fallen watcher, angels. We talked about rebellious, terrible decisions, people who taunt the living God or make a mockery of him. Bad idea, like major life decisions that Gibborim number 1 made. That Gibborim number 2, named David, corrected and amended with the sword of his own making. So, David, remember, if we go back to the story just for a moment, woolly man. He's a man dressed in wool, showing up, ready to lay a smackdown on anybody who would ever taunt the armies of the living God. Pretty spectacular. David's a child, more or less, and he's mighty. But David doesn't stay a child too much longer because he's about to grow up real stinking quick. Because even if you do a mighty thing, like slaughter a human tank, remember we talked about this, Goliath was an armored tank, like an MRAP. It'd be like definitely a child smoking an MRAP, which is super unexpected, but it happens. I know a lot of you who could tell me stories about it, which if you're on the other side of the enemy's camp, that's a stinking mighty act, right? But if you're on the losing side of that, you're definitely begrudged. So I get distracted. That being said, David definitely did some mighty things. But I didn't read one verse real quick that I definitely needed to have read. At the very end of the last thing that David did, it said, the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines as far as the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the slain Philistines lay along the way to Sharim, even to Gath and Ekron. The sons of Israel returned from chasing the Philistines and plundered their camps. That's a good moment. Then David took the Philistine's head, remember, brought it to Jerusalem. I think that's Golgotha. But he put his weapons, Goliath's weapons, in his tent. This is going to be one of the most important things I think I've ever learned, because David and these weapons, to me, are some of the coolest things that have ever happened in the history of mankind. But most people I've never really heard talk about or trace the weapons, just the weapons, because so much of me is just in love with the weapons. And I know some of you are genuinely concerned about that and you're uncomfortable with that, and that's okay. But I'm almost certain that if you want to be a mighty person, you better be able to know what's in your armory. Actually know what's in your armory. It's not always going to be the sword and the spear and the armor and all that cool stuff, but it's definitely going to be what are your skill sets that you actually have been doing and learning your entire life just because of who you are and what your life has been. Everybody's got an armory. Everybody, every single person that today, exactly where you are right now, at this moment, you've got a toolkit right back there. You've got a playbook. You've got skills and experiences and talents and giftings and abilities, or just a way of doing life that is only yours. You are one of one. Even if you're a clone, you are still one of one. I mean it. The Father does mighty things. If you need to know anything more about clones, go read. I strongly encourage you to look into a book that's called The Gospel to Every Creature. Yes, good news for Nephilim, transhumanism, vampires, and something else. Anyways, I recommend that one strongly in my book, Snatched from the Flames. I digress. Getting into dragon speak and seed of the serpents and all kinds of other stuff that are out there that need to be addressed. But there is an amazing opportunity for each of you who is one of one to use those talents and those mighty giftings. If you would look at them as actually powerful, mighty weapons, because they are mighty weapons. They are such powerful weapons. You are the only person who knows, like some of you out there right now, you can wire stuff, actually rewire stuff, and then put it back together. You like have this mechanical capability to fix things that break. You just do. And if you're one of those people, you're like, yeah, I'm that guy. Oh yeah, I'm definitely that person. Then everybody around you knows that you're that person, and you tend to just be asked to do a lot more work for the rest of your life, and you're desperately needed, because others of us, that's about the hardest thing we've ever tried to do, ever. We're in like screaming agony trying to change a toilet pump one time, just the flapper in the back. Took me 3 days. I destroyed my kitchen, or my bathroom. The sink came off the wall. I wasn't even trying to touch the sink, but I found out it wasn't mounted to the wall properly. By that, I mean it was on a pedestal that I moved. Turns out the whole sink was supported by the pedestal. Anyways, I try to do projects. I don't have that same natural flair. I drive a house down the road, which means things break and rattle loose. And I have to chase wiring problems for days through rat-infested poops areas that are just horrific. There's black tanks. They're full of poop and pee. Not anymore because we got a composting toilet. Anyways, I have to chase wiring problems on the regs, and they're difficult and they're miserable. And every time I do, I'm like, why can't I just hire an electrician? Because I live in forests randomly all over the country at any given time. It's hard to find forest electricians. I know they're out there. I know there's swamp electricians, but they charge an inordinate amount of money. Anyways, I'm trying to learn skill sets like that. But if you're that guy, man, you're the dependable friend that just can come over and literally save humans' lives. I actually mean that. People are losing like days of their life because they're worrying and they're stressed out about things that are broken around them that they just have no idea how to fix. And it's a living nightmare. But maybe you guys can make trades instead of always trading mammon, sigil money. If you don't know about sigils, that's magic, bad news magic. That's what money is. Babylonian magic. True story. Trade goods like I'll make you a cake, because some of you out there make the most delicious cakes that have ever been known to taste ever. You could trade and barter, because that's so much of what becoming a Gibborim is going to be talking about, is a trade and barter economy. Underground movements are amazing, but they're generally dependent on meeting each other's needs, not through magic money, but through the spirit of the living God and knowing each other's needs. So, handymans, you're mighty men. Handy women, good gracious, you're mighty, and you're needed. You guys know what I'm talking about, though. If the other person in your group is that super organizational, or maybe you're the super organizational person who notices every single time I have a typo in one of my descriptions, or they're the people who notice that things are not quite right here and they need to set them in order and tidy in just that right way, you systematizers, you systemizing people, you're fantastically needed in the body. Generally, I don't relate too much to that. I tend to live my life like a scatter bomb at times, and then I'm exceptionally tidy at others. I have 2 children. Try to keep up with that. It's difficult. They outnumber me every single day I wake up, but not me and my wife yet. Anyways, I am just desperately in need of systemizers in my life, and I know everybody who has one of those in their life praises God for you when you come in the clutch. Really. Like anytime you got to plan a big meal, like a feast. If you haven't thought about it, you should read about it and just plan for the feast of Passover. It's exceptionally wonderful and will change your life. I wrote a chapter called When Passover Provides. You can listen to me read it. Maybe I'll tag that one below. It would behoove you to cover the door of your home with the blood of the Lamb who was slain before the foundations of the world. That is the Messiah, and get into a covenant with him. You don't need to slaughter a lamb anymore. He was slain once and for all. Just look into it. Dr. Michael Lake and Mary Lou did a great broadcast on it many times. Check it out. I highly recommend them as well. But you need to know there are those people in your group who can help organize things like that. And remember all the ingredients, like for throwing an entire party and festival. They're incredible humans. One of the most powerful people I've ever known in my life has been a systemizer. They're incredibly critical for me. Surgeons, way up there for me, because they've wielded the blades and put my body back together. If they're not very systematized, people literally can't walk again. I'm not comfortable putting an oil filter on my car without referencing a YouTube video 15, 18 times before I do it. They put body parts back inside other body parts comfortably, confidently, and they watch it turn back on. I don't know how to do that. That's incredible. Very important person in the body, right? Everybody needs a good doctor buddy in the underground. You need a couple of them. You need about 15 nurses too, let's be real, because every doctor needs about 15 nurses. Let's be real. Your mind is not all it was once, because you got indoctrinated by another 8 years of garbage. Not all of it, just most everything you learned in there was total nonsense and lies, and just to sell better drugs and better business bureau advertisements to people, because that's that PhD. Congratulations. You got deeper indoctrinated. Really. Go look into actual medicine and health and nutrition and supplementation and the power of chiropractic. There's so many things out there. I get distracted. Mighty people all over the world have so many talents and ability, but they're ensnared in the Babylonian magic money system instead of just meeting the needs of their neighbors, because they don't even know their neighbors, because they live in compartmentalized houses in neighborhoods that are compartmentalized with fences. It's crazy, you guys. Why do you live separated? I'm so glad that everybody's losing, not their jobs per se, just the requirement to escape your life. I hope you all stop and don't go into the entertainment trap during this time. Just feed on your actual family's relationships, cultivate it, work in it. Cry, get super frustrated and angry and deal with it with each other. Be repentant. Deal with all those areas of your life that you've never dealt with, because that is how you be a mighty man. You address the weaknesses too. And David, I got to say it right now, had some major catastrophically bad weaknesses in his life. They become strongholds and footholds for the enemy to use to destroy him sincerely at times, and or the people around him, and or basically everybody else in the entire country, because he yokes the wrong kind of saddle on his back and goes down a riding rail of despair and hopelessness and misery and loneliness. Total loneliness. Anyways, David is about to make a decision here with what he does with these weapons that are in his armory. And later in life, he's going to use those same weapons to wreak shop in a totally different way. It's going to cost him, and it's going to cost one family their entire family line. So, if you didn't know it, David takes those weapons with him, puts them in his tent. The next time these weapons show up, we're going to find out that David is now a man on the run. He goes from being like top dog ever crushing life by cutting off Philistines' heads. I know it's graphic, but read the Bible actually. It's horrifically graphic, and you need to read it all, no matter how old you are, no matter how old your children are. They actually need to hear the Bible. You'll let them watch Disney, but you won't let them read the story in the Bible that's graphic and scary. But they can go watch Disney characters cut each other's heads off for 6 years. Anyways, I have some issues with Disney, if you can't tell. They captured your imagination and filled it with destructive things. This will capture not your imagination, just your spirit for eternity and make it live in abundance and hope. It's better. But David goes out, starts slaying all kinds of Philistines, wreaking shop, driving back the enemy, okay? Powerful. But he's going in the name. He's got the authority. He's got the power of the living God upon him because he was made for such a time as this. He's moving in his incredible moment of life. He's going to meet someone who will forever be changed because of his relationship with him and their relationship together. That's Jonathan. And I'm just going to read a couple of verses about it. Now it came about when he had finished speaking to Saul that the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as himself. Saul took him that day and did not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his armor, including his sword and his bow and his belt. So David went out wherever Saul sent him and prospered. And Saul set him over the men of war. And it was pleasing in the sight of all the people and also in the sight of Saul's servants. Jonathan and David have become knit together by their souls. I've talked about a lot in other videos and in my book about soul ties. This is where we get a biblical foundational understanding and a principle of first mention. Go look into hermeneutics. It's how you build doctrine. Super critically important. But the first mention of things in the scripture, this is one of those other, like, we're in the early portion of the story. Remember, the Bible's like yay thick without the knife blade in it. This is the beginning. You should read from this start to the end every time if possible when you want to learn something or build a doctrine out of it. It's really critical. But this is where soul ties come in. And soul ties, I would argue, and I believe you can, because it's me talking now and here it goes. There's a body, there's a spirit, and there's a soul. Tripartite nature of man. Yes, biblically true. To the world, utter nonsense and garbage. Even though I studied psychology, which was soul study, we weren't allowed to talk about the soul or address spiritual matters unless it involved New Age doctrines and radical transformation theologies that were outside of this. As long as you talk about anything to heal the soul that did involve this, and any type of drug that did some kind of magic fairy pixel dust thing in people's foreheads that changed them, that was cool. But no soul and spirit talk, actually. Unless it was Jungian soul magic work, which is totally apparently acceptable and insured these days. But if it's spiritual matters, like by the scripture, it's not allowed. But the spirit, the soul, and the body, yes, that stuff. Definitely something we can see, feel, touch, experience, the human experience, body. Soul, I believe it would be like our mind, our will, and our emotions. These are our soul areas. And then the spirit would be the unique spiritual, the image itself of the living God, the breath of the living God, the spirit that is eternal. That's an eternal, well, maybe not eternal, maybe immortal in a sense. Eternal, I guess. No, sorry. Eternal means without beginning. Immortal. Our immortal soul's spirit. Our immortal spirit. I think our mind, our will, and our emotions absolutely, like our memories, our thought patterns, the way we've developed critical thinking in our life, the way we respond when something happens in a given situation emotionally. Like, these things have been conditioned into us. The soul is the middle ground. It's the middle earth where our spirit and our body have the war, right? The spirit, even if we're set apart or if we seal ourselves to try to be in a covenant, to seek to be in eternal covenant with the Most High, our soul is where a lot of this war is waged. Well, during life, our soul can grab on and gravitate so powerfully, it can be knit together with other people. Yes, they're called soul ties. You can be in a soul tie to other human beings, and they're generally created during two specific kinds of experiences: sexual things and or high intensity, adrenaline pumping, like violent experiences as well. They tend to come through those areas most strongly. They can also come through powerful, like I said, life-changing moments when you're tested to the limits. Good, bad, and all in between. But the extremity of an experience in a life, something that was so meaningful and impactful in a powerfully good way, can create and knit together soul ties as well. People that were deliverers to you in a moment of life where you so desperately needed that, and they came through and they were dependable. They became someone who you were knit together in a soul tie with. But I don't think there's anywhere as powerful that soul tie is created except through war and the bedroom. Yes. I'm going to try to keep it PG-13. Those acts, they're intimate acts. Men who go through war together are genuinely not the same in any physical way as their buddies that they didn't go to war together with ever could be. But in the military, they'll call them battle buddies. This is like you want your bestie right there to watch your back. Like when you actually go into battle, and we're going to talk a little spiritual, physical battle. When you go into battle together, knowingly, premeditated battle, where battle that was you knew was coming, kind of war, or an ongoing perpetual conflict where you're away from your friends and your family for long periods of time, days, weeks, months, years. When you have to pick up and uproot every area of your normal Monday through Friday life and suddenly just go be about war and go be about hunting, being a manslayer, to go out and be a manslayer, or to go out into the thick of it, right, into the fire. People that are first responders, people that have to go into those zones. That you develop relationships with people during those experiences, vicariously connected tangentially to each other, that are so meaningful, they change you forever. And they are called soul ties right here. It said that the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. They're connected now, and they will stay connected. And I actually mean that, even if when you go through experiences together, those souls are tested. When they flex, they bend, and sometimes they break and snap and get ruined and shattered, and all of the destructive things that may take place in one of those people's lives can flow also to impact you. These soul ties establish a bridge between us and other people that can also transmit spiritual and physical junk between each other for good, because when you're in a battlefield environment, you actually need the other guy to have a connection to you that is so powerful he can sense when you're in danger. Like actually sense when you are in danger. You get this preeminent, screaming, sudden chuck, grunt in your gut, something is wrong with my other soul. That's totally something anybody who's been in a real marriage has had. If you have a really good relationship with someone, you suddenly feel that something's not right with that person. There's a connection that's not your body, correct? There's a supernatural bridge. There's a spiritual bridge that's connected you to this person that can suddenly get tuned into something that's going on in their life that wasn't there. That's a connection that's incredibly valuable when life and death comes down to a matter of one of us fell asleep, but the other one stayed vigilant and was on guard still. And I'm suddenly, why do I feel like something horrible is happening to my brother right now? And you wake up out of a dead sleep and you go and you end up being the one to stop what was about to happen to him. There's moments in life that having that soul tie becomes so critically important, because that person is the one who becomes your advocate, becomes the one who delivers you. There's so many brothers in arms who know what I'm talking about, who have story after story after story and testimony after testimony of how when you were in a crushing amount of despair, your brother called you, that he lifted you up, that he strengthened you, that he remembered what you'd been through, or he called and you guys talked shop for a while and you shared those stories that you never let out of the box except with the one who was there with you. And David is going to experience something that is the worst side of this, though, because his brother in this is going to die. We get to read this story. David just lives it from the backside. He's living it. He doesn't know that this man who he's going into this covenant with will be his best friend, will be his defender, will be the one who saves his life, that David will save his life, that they will do battle together, and they don't know about the giants and the armies, and that his own father is going to be the one hunting his best friend. He doesn't know any of that, and David doesn't know. David doesn't know today, in this moment, that his best friend is going to die on a battlefield where David doesn't get to be. David will do everything he can to try to be on that battlefield. David will set up an entire army to try to go be on that battlefield. David will bring his best mighty men with him to try to be on the battlefield, to be with Jonathan the day he dies. And David will not be able to go and rescue his buddy. David will just get the news that his best friend is dead. And it's a horrible feeling when you lose your battle buddy, when you're not there. Somehow it's more forgivable if you're there. I think if you're going to be in the fray with them, that at least you could have known what you would have done. At least you knew you did. At least you know what you could have done. I didn't get that. My battle buddy, Jarrett, held me together when I was going through hell. And I was being used and tormented and trying to be an avenger, using these grudges I'd held my whole life to enact violence with wholesale reckless commitment to try to be a mighty man, to try to be a hero. And I was dying. I was the walking dead. My body was so physically broken. And he was waking up in the middle of the night to me screaming. He comforted me. He helped me put my uniform on when I couldn't even stand. He picked me up. And he was my brother. And I loved him. And he went through this with me. And he shipped out. And I shipped out back to Colorado, to my own nightmare. And I woke up to a text message that he died. And that's a nightmare. It's a nightmare to not to get to be there. I just wanted to die with him. I was miserable, and I just wanted to die with him. If I had to die anywhere, I just wanted to die with my battle buddy. Yep. And that's freaking awful. He widowed a woman who he loved dearly. Young girl. Just barely a woman. He widowed her. For what? And that's it, man. That's it when you come to it at the end of it and you realize that you're dying from pocket change, for a drug trade, for corporate sponsorship, for defense contracts, for mammon, for fashion, for patriotism. You're forgotten after you die. Read Ecclesiastes. There's the whole of life at the end of it. We go back to dust. I don't even know where his dust is. I don't know where their dust is. We could put a white stone on them and then we can all twice a year say thank you to the dirt. It's a miserable, horrible thing. There's consequences for soul ties. And if they die, and that soul tie remains, it remains bound to the death that took them. It remains bound to the sorrow, to the despair, to the hopelessness, to the brokenness that is now in your soul that infected you because there's a wound in you that's not healed, and it starts to poison your soul. And so many of us out there, so many people have lost their battle buddies. You didn't have to go to combat to make a battle buddy. You have good friends in your family and your relationships around you that now look at you like you're insane, that hate you, that actively persecute you, that mock you, that belittle you, that scourge you with words that are so precisely painful. They destroy your identity. You're the walking wounded out there. We're being torn to pieces. And some of us, because we actually read this book and started walking out what it said to do. If we're going to suffer, which we will, let it be for that. Let it be for his name's sake. If you're going to lose a battle buddy, if you're going to go into the underground, if you're going to go and engage in kingdom work, in real kingdom work, there's going to be bloodshed. There's going to be attrition. There will be a loss of loved ones. If you want to be a mighty person, you are going to walk with death alongside you at times. Sometimes all the time. Sometimes that's all they're made for. Sometimes people are made to die. Sincerely, it's biblical. Some people are genuinely born to die, and it's brutal. And you should weep with those who weep. And you should rejoice with those who rejoice. But boy, sometimes you just need to weep with those who weep. And some of you lost your best friend now thinks you're an idiot because whatever it is you talk about now. Why can't we just go drink at the bars and hang out with everybody else and talk about our fashion choices? Because you suddenly got a conviction in your heart that human beings are genuinely dying every single day, and that is horrible, and you want to do something about it. And why don't other people care about it? Why don't you care? Why aren't you willing to sacrifice your life and lay down in front of the scourge in the Colosseum of public opinion and offer up your body to try to save a life? Actually go save a life. Go rescue the unborn. There's a girl named Evangaline Dunn out there. Evangaline Dunn. Go look into her and see a woman progress and mature into an identity to be a mighty woman. What a mighty woman. She stands there and is belittled and mocked and hated and reviled and spit upon and cursed and condemned and accused of, and yet she stands there interceding for the unborn, for the women, because she loves them. Her father instilled in her how to be a mighty one. Thomas Dunn, Through the Black. Angry Sun Media is their work. A mighty man who's been out there on the front line waging a war, seeking deliverance in the people's lives around him for decades. His daughter was raised in that household. She saw her dad and became a mighty one too. What a miracle. That's a genealogy of faith. That's a righteous crown that he stores up for the rest of his life. We need that in our life. We need to have powerful, righteous soul ties with the people in our life. But if they're unrighteous, they need to be severed with the sword of the Spirit. They need to be cut off. You need to be cleansed. Deliverance needs to be brought into that area of your life. So you stop carrying around the spiritual baggage of people you had soul ties with because you screwed around when you were not recognizing the value of intimacy in your life, and you connected yourself to a bunch of people who now you have a bad exchange going on. You need to sever that stuff. If a woman has relations with a man, that man's DNA will be in her body the rest of her life. She literally carries it with her the rest of her life. That's a soul tie and a body tie. There's supernatural power to affect both in the kingdom of God and in mercy and in love and forgiveness for yourself, for the people around you, for all of those situations that have taken place in your life. Mercy and deliverance and healing can flow in a more powerful way than anything you've ever imagined if you would lay it down at his feet and ask him to heal that. I miss Grimmel. I miss my battle buddy. I miss him terribly some days. Some days I have been so alone that I just wanted to be I just wanted to be able to talk to somebody about that time in my life and those moments in my life that him and I were the only ones that experienced it. I have a few pictures and a couple of videos from our time together in our life. That's wonderful. That's a blessing. But I want the conversations. David is about to develop all of those conversations with this man. He's about to develop those relationships. He's about to go into war and battle and splendor and plunder and all of the wonderful things that come with having relationships like that. You never live more high and low than when you do with a battle buddy in your life. The Father blessed me with a wife to have as my battle buddy, to be my primary armor bearer with me. He blessed me so powerfully in ways I can't even articulate and describe. And she's waged war with me for 10 years. And I've been the one waging the war in my own household for most of it. But she's a mighty woman. And I'm thankful to have her as my battle buddy every day. Her love is sweeter than anything I've ever known. It healed my soul in ways that my relationship with Grimmel didn't. It healed me and continues to heal me because that's a covenant that's more powerful than anything on this earth. A husband and a wife. And it's the most targeted covenant for destruction in the world all the time since the beginning. Split the man and the woman. Split them, ruin them, steal from them their identities. Oh, sorry guys. But God is all about restoring identity. The whole of your script, the whole of this book, the whole of the testimony of God is from beginning to end, how our identities were split. They were stolen from us. The connections to what it was, our body, our spirit, and our soul was supposed to be have been broken. But praise be to the one who can restore that which the enemy meant for great evil, for great good, and the saving of many lives. He can restore broken covenants. He can renew that which was taken from us. In mighty and powerful ways, he can do that, and he will do that, because his story from the beginning to the end is a restoration of our identity in him, our identity because of him, our identity because of the testimonies of those that have gone before us, the forerunners in our faith. You need to study the forerunners of our faith. You need to memorize their stories so you can tell them to the people that you're entrusted with at any time, day or night. This is how you sharpen your sword. Sharpen it fiercely. I know I was doing a bunch on the way of the blade, and during one of those videos, I pulled this knife out. This is a cold steel Shanghai Shadow. I left the marks on there just so you could see it. But I tried to cut sugar cane with it, and it went terribly because I'd never actually sharpened all the way, re-edged it and sharpened this knife. I couldn't cut through it easily. Somebody sent me a message that was convicting, another brother of the blade out there, and said in my sharpening video, which is called Get Edgy, that I shouldn't down talk sanders for sharpening, because basically every knife that's ever been made now is done on a sander, and it's true. It's extremely easy to screw up a knife while sanding it and sharpening it with a sander, belt sander. Let me be descriptive. With a belt sander that's made for resharpening tools. They go so fast, and I'm somewhat shaky at times, and I've lost a lot of my dexterity and strength in my hand from catastrophic firearms injuries and horrible, violent living. So it's hard for me to hold things super still sometimes. But he suggested I really give it another chance. And normally I'll spend 8 hours sharpening a knife with a hand stone, the triangle sharp maker, to totally re-edge it. It can take me 8 hours from beginning to end. But I went out there with that sander, and I was out there for 15 minutes. I had a bucket of water next to me, because when you sand things, they get very hot. And if it gets too hot, it damages that special crystalline structure of the steel that keeps the edge holding ability the best it could be. It's called tempering. We talked about that. But when sanding, you heat up the steel extremely quickly and you can burn out the edge, actually burn it out. And so it won't hold the edge as well in that area, or it will damage the blade and make it so brittle that it will chip. So this is why I've avoided belt sanders. But if you quench the blade, or I do it barehanded so that I can feel if it's getting hot at all, I quench it again, cool it down, keep it cool all the time. But in 15 minutes, I re-edged this knife. 8 hours of work versus 15 minutes. And then I spent 1 hour finishing it, actually going through all the stones on there. And this thing is one of the sharpest knives I've ever made. Sharpest edges I've ever made. I'll get there with the sharpest knife I've ever made. I'm working on it. But this thing is outrageously sharp now, and I can hack through these stinking briars and thistles and all the thorns and all the things that are inevitable in forest lands and on a property, and working in a garden where you just get chewed up and mangled all the time. You're always beat up. If you go outside and you ever live at all, you're definitely never not needing a Band-Aid, which is good. Life was made for Band-Aid keeping. I digress. The belt sander to me was a force multiplier, and I didn't know that, and I've avoided it because it was an intimidating tool for me. It took off so much material so quickly that I was scared to touch it. Real relationships, real covenant, have the potential to take so much material off of you so quickly that they will burn you out, that they will make you brittle, and that you will shatter worse because of it from then on out. They can make you never recover broken bad the rest of your life. They have more potential, though, to change your life in a matter of a minute than any other thing that you will ever experience in this earth. They have the power to deliver you and buff off of you decades of destruction that have been laid on your shoulders, because they can come along and cast a burden off your shoulders that you've been carrying for decades of your life with a word. They can actually cast it off of you. Read Mark 6 and read about the authority that has been given to believers, not a corporate church, not a universal stamped Roman God approved church. The authority given to each and every one of you who calls on the name of the living God and walks in his ways. The identity to cast out demons, to cast out unclean spirits, to heal the sick, to make the lame walk, to literally raise the dead. These aren't theories. These are real powers that are given to people that walk in covenant with the Most High God. In a moment, he can cast off of you the generational curse that has been plaguing your family since the day you were born and time immemorial before it. This is what God intends for people's lives. This is what Yahweh made us for, was to walk in mighty power. Relationships like Jonathan and David have are like the belt sanders of our souls. They are unbelievably powerful and incredibly efficient at doing mighty things for us, to equip us, to hone us like iron sharpening iron in a way that is supernaturally precise, calculated, diligently important, unbelievably powerful. They have the ability to hone us into the sharpest edge we could ever be, to cut through the heart of darkness and to fire a shot into the enemy's camp that sets a beacon of hope alight for all of the people trapped behind enemy lines to see that there's still power in the kingdom of God, no matter what the darkness would say. That's what we're here for. That's what mighty men and women do. They don't always go and become the president, because generally it's not what you think it is. They don't become the hero that the world worships. They don't become idols. And if they do, man, it's destructive. And the whole kingdom struggles because of it. Don't allow yourself to be an idol. Pray God cuts your head off rather than you ever become an idol for another man or a woman. Let your name not be remembered. We don't remember David because his name. We remember David because of his acts of faith. We remember Abraham because of what he did, not just the name. It was the name he bore. There are such mighty acts waiting for people but they're trapped up in those areas of our life. And we need to work powerfully with the people God has placed in our life to work in those areas, to amend those areas. 15 minutes of work. I've not really finished this blade ever because the last time I took a sander to it, I took too much off. The belly of it used to extend further. It used to have a little bit longer reach here, which would have made it a little more practical tool for, I do a lot of roll chops. I genuinely chop a lot of fruit. I eat like a camel. Maybe not. I eat a lot of grains. I don't know. I eat like a camel a lot. I use the back part of my teeth more. Do you know what I'm saying? Chris and Liz Bailey, you know what I'm getting at here. Core Health Products. Check it out. Eat better, more like fruits and vegetables, mostly nuts, seed, berries, predominantly an agrarian diet. That's like lots of things that I find. Unless I can bring it down with my own hands, I'm not as vigilant on meat eating, except sometimes a little bit. I was basically vegetarian completely for 5 months straight, because I lived on a farm and have done nothing but work the sweat of the brow and eat of the fruit of the fields. And it was amazing. And I used most of those parts of my mouth. And I cut an enormous amount of fruit. But I didn't use this knife because it got a little short because I took the sander to it. And I didn't stabilize the sander, and it was warbling all over the place. And I just chased it. So you can see it just took too much off here. See that? I get a little shaky, and it's hard. It's really hard to use it. But because of that, I never went back to it and finished it. But I got to do that, and it'll turn into whatever it's going to turn into, because it's going to be set apart for that task. It's okay if too much material goes off of our lives. There's a lot of us that need to let that material be cast off, and we can get healed and restored from it. Because as much as I want to tell you that Jonathan and David's relationship will be the source of his deliverance. In the beginning, it will be. But at the end, it will also be one of the hardest areas, I think, in his life that does not get addressed in the same way that it needed to. And it causes wounds in David that are so severe that he writes chapters and chapters and chapters in the Psalms addressing those. There's the shadow of death that follows him and lingers him, because David takes those same swords that he took from Goliath, and he ends up, I believe, dedicating them to the priests, dedicating them to the Father. He leaves them in the house of the Lord. He leaves them at the place where people go to worship, because I think David took his blades, his champion's sword, and he dedicated it. He laid it at the feet of his master. He laid his sword at the feet of his master and said, if you want me to take it, I will. And that's what I need to do with my blades. That's what you need to do with your talents. That's what you need to do with your armory. Lay it at the feet of your master, dedicate it unto him. And any of them he wants to pick up and use, may he know that they are quivers in his bow that he can use anytime that he would like. How good would it make you feel if you had a son? I know some of you don't have a son, and you may not get this, but if he woke up in the morning and looked at you and said, "Father, I want to do your will today. Is there any areas in my life that I'm not doing that? Is there any areas that I can work on in my life that would make me more like you, that it would make me a better bearer of your name, that I might honor you?" How powerful that would feel to have someone who is eager to receive instructions like that from a father. It's incredible. But every day that's waiting for each and every one of us. Every day that's waiting for each and every one of us. Lay your armory at his feet. And I assure you of this, he will give you the tools that you need to go do mighty things so that you can become a Gibborim. I love you, each and every one of you. Thank you for being here with me. I pray that you go be vulnerable. I pray you go and radically destroy the kingdom of the enemy by your honesty, by your sincerity, by your vulnerability, by your willingness to work harder than anybody else out there, to serve and to sacrifice and to live dangerously. So do that. Be safe out there. And by that, I genuinely mean live as dangerously as possible every single day of your life, because the days are evil, but you were born for such a time as this. I'll catch you later.